Longines have just released a brand new Legend Diver white dial, and I think this is genuinely my new favourite Longines watch. And there's a couple of subtle features that they've changed from the last iterations of the Longines Diver to make it my new Longines watch. It's not, to me, just a colour change. There's a couple of things that I will go over in this video that are really subtle changes, but make all the difference to this watch. Welcome back to the Chisholm Hunter channel. My name is Harrison, as always. And you might notice that we're somewhere a little bit different today. We're actually in the Isle of Lewis and the Isle of Harris in Scotland. And it's a beautiful place, and I'm filming a really epic video for you at the moment. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you do enjoy these videos, I'd really appreciate it. And that one is coming very soon. So before we kick off with the technicalities that are different to the last models, let's just cover the basic specs of this watch and how I feel about those specs. So firstly, it comes in at 39mm in diameter. That's the Goldilocks size for most of us watch enthusiasts. With that said, I would say it wears just that little bit more chunky than 39mm. It looks more like a 40 in my eyes. And the reason being is that it does have that internal bezel and the two pushers on the right hand side outside the watch. This kind of gives the dial more real estate. It kind of expands that dial out a little bit more and makes it look just that touch bigger. Plus, when you mix that with the fact that white is quite a bold, punchy colour, or it's not a colour, I should say, but it's quite bold, it's quite bright, it does make it look just that little touch bigger. If you did want something that looked that little bit smaller, I would go with one of the darker dials, maybe the blue. This model comes in at 12.7mm in thickness, so it's beautifully thin, and you can really tell when it's on the wrist, because it just looks incredible. It sits really, really close to that wrist. It also comes in at 47mm lug to lug. It comes in full stainless steel, and you can definitely tell that this model is more geared up to dressiness, if you want to say that, because of the amount of polished metal that's on the bracelet and also the case of this watch. It looks beautiful in the light, but it definitely feeds more into that dressy category. Now, one thing that I'm not as sure about, and I'd like to know your opinion on this, is the bracelet. The bracelet is this kind of combination of a rice grain bracelet with two outer links on the right and left hand side. So you have almost 5 links, but the 3 in the middle are kind of rice grainy. And I'm not really sure about that bracelet, if I'm totally honest. I think I'd rather a NATO strap on this watch, but again, that is probably just personal preference. With that said, what I do really like is the functionality that they've added. This bracelet actually comes with a double safety folding clasp and micro adjustments, and it has 4 adjustment ranges, so you can size it exactly to your wrist at any time, and I think adding that functionality to this watch is pretty incredible. The movement on this watch is a powerhouse of the movement, and it's actually a movement that we can see across other watches in Longines range, like the Hydra Conquest. This is the L888 movement, and it's actually hidden behind the closed caseback. It beats at 25,200 VPH. It has a monocrystalline silicon balance spring and 72 hours of power reserve. To top this off, it is fully automatic, so it's not manual wound. It does have that rotor that spins in the back and charges your watch up. The caseback of this watch is closed, and you can see that beautiful silhouette of a diver. But what's more interesting is if you look really closely, and this is a subtle little Easter egg for you guys, you can actually see that the diver is wearing a Longines Legend Diver, which is pretty awesome. The details, that is what makes luxury, and that's what really excites me. These tiny little details that mean so much to people. Yeah, it's nice. When it comes to the crowns on the right hand side, the top crown rotates the interior bezel and it's bidirectional, and the bottom crown winds up the movement. So if you want to increase the power in your movement, you can wind that up using the bottom crown. Staying true to Longines history on this watch, they've actually given it a 300-meter water resistance. And obviously there's a ton of history involving this watch in the 1950s when it was initially launched under a different name, but it was kind of the same vibe. And it was for diving, so they've stayed true to their roots in that respect. And I quite like that. I'm actually thinking of doing an entirely different video on that. So if you want to see that, let me know in the comments. It's a really interesting watch. I also think it was a bit of a sleeper amongst Longines range. I mean, whenever we think of Longines now, we think of the Hydra Conquest GMT, we think of the Conquest, we think of the Conquest Heritage. Not often do people think of the Longines Legend Diver, but I do think it's one of the most underrated models in Longines arsenal, period. Alright, so now we get to those spicy new upgrades that they've added. They've just grated the spice over it and made it just a little bit brighter. So firstly, we have the print of the text. So the numerals, the hour markers, and also the quoting to the hands and all that kind of stuff. It is now in black instead of white. Now, when we look at the previous iterations of the Longines Legend Diver, the text or the hour markers and all that kind of stuff is primarily in white. And this is the first time that they've actually gone down a different route. They've gone for the black against white, which is beautifully contrasting. Now, when we look at the triangle at the top at the 12 o'clock mark, it again is that slight bit different. It's actually filled with luminova, and it gives it that kind of greeny hue, and it just looks unbelievable on this dial. Perhaps I'm biased because it's a white dial and I always seem to gravitate towards white. It probably is because I'm biased, but you can't deny it looks great. I definitely have an infatuation with white dials. I've just been thinking about that for a second. I'm biased. I am. I'm totally biased. And then we get to the hands. The hands are another one that are very different to what we normally see on the Legend Diver. Normally, they're in silver. They reflect the light quite nicely, especially against a dark dial. But because Longines have identified that would be pretty hard to read, they've put them in black, in satin black, so that they contrast just perfectly with that dial and make it really easy to read. Just think for a second, when you look at the interior rotating bezel diving models that are out there, let's think of the IWC Aqua Timer or the JLC Polaris. I think that this, at a fraction of the price, and we'll move on to the price in a second, is in competition with them. And that is saying a lot. I think Longines have really honed in on their designs over the last 3 years in particular, and it's making a big boom in the industry because in terms of affordability, but also quality, they're hitting the nail on the head. The price on this model comes in at £3,150. So it's actually £50 more expensive than the other Longines heritage divers. And I'm not sure why. If you know that, let me know in the comments, because honestly, I'm not sure why. I would have thought because they're using black, satin black kind of hands instead of silver, that it would be less expensive, slightly. So there probably is something that I'm missing there, but yeah, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think of this watch, by the way, because I'm not sure if maybe I'm just falling in love with it because it has a white dial. And genuinely, I tend to do that. I tend to get really infatuated by things with white dials. I just love the way they look. That's a me thing, I suppose. But this is Longines Legend Diver, and honestly, I think it's my new favourite Longines watch. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have enjoyed, please hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate that. Or follow our Instagram at Chisholm Hunter Watches, or my Instagram at HB Lifelens, or our podcast, the Into the Mind podcast. And I'll see you guys real soon.